SYS presents Adventures in Online Education.
Hello, friends. You're listening to SYS Presents Adventures in Online Education. I'm your host, Natalie Conway. Thanks for being here. On today's episode, I have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Luke Hobson. Luke is the Senior Instructional Designer and Program Manager at MIT, the author of the book, What I Wish I Knew Before Becoming an Instructional Designer, the founder of Instructional Design Institute, and the host of the Dr. Luke Hobson podcast and YouTube channel. Today, Dr. Luke and I talk about what an instructional designer is and the awesome jobs they can land, from working with the Denver Broncos to KFC or even Google. We'll also learn how to design our online course instruction using course mapping and effective frameworks such as universal design and understanding by design. So, you ready? Let's learn something new. I am so excited to have you on the podcast today, Dr. Luke Hobson. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course, Natalie. Thank you so much for allowing me to come on and nerd out with you. Really can't wait.
Oh my gosh, I love nerding out. It's my favorite thing. Anyone who's listened to a single episode of the podcast knows that. We're going to nerd out real hard today. I am super excited because this is a topic we've spoken about somewhat directly and absolutely tangentially a lot in the 3 seasons. And so I am just really stoked for the audience to hear your perspective and your experience and bring all of that so that we can become even better instructional designers here in kindergarten through high school. So the cool thing is that at SYS, we work to help online educators specifically from kindergarten through high school, like I said, create their own curriculum. And everyone is really at a different spot with their comfort level there. For sure, some folks are ready to dive in and just want to start building from scratch. Others maybe want to take, what we call canned curriculum and take some pieces from that and then add in their own, whatever it is. It's really fun work. It's really challenging. I think it's super rewarding. Can you, Luke, explain to our audience what your job actually entails as an instructional designer? Because you are legit an instructional designer. So one, what is that? What do you do? And how did you get there?
Yes, my title actually does say instructional designer, so I do feel qualified to be able to talk about this a little bit. So as far as with the entire instructional design field, what I like to be able to say is that I understand how people learn. And then I am fortunate enough that I get to work with other folks who we call subject matter experts, or we shorten that down to SMEs or SMEs, depending upon how you say it. And then we get to partner with them and work with them in order to then be able to create a meaningful and engaging and an interactive type of a learning experience. And the entire point of the process for everything that is we were going to be doing is that everything needs to align back and show clarity and transparency to the goals and to the outcomes and to the skills, so that way our students and learners know exactly why we are asking them to be able to do something. So that is a short and sweet pitch about what instructional design actually is. As far as for how I got here, it's a really weird kind of story.
I love these ones.
Yeah, it's really strange. So because of the fact that I worked in higher education for years and years, most people assume that I love school. And the thing was that I actually failed out of school because I hated it so much. So, fun fact, I failed out of high school my junior year.
Oh, so close.
It's so close, but I did not see the point or the purpose, because after taking something for going through and taking medieval literature for, 4 or 5 times in a row, and I was just like, how is this helping me? Like, what am I doing with this information? I don't know about how to apply to college. I don't know about taxes. I don't know how to do interviews. And I was like, but instead, I keep on getting beaten down by subject matters that I don't understand about. And I would always ask people about, well, why am I learning this? And I always would hear the same type of line of like, oh, you're going to figure that out when you're older. And that didn't work. So I ended up just completely bombing. I had to go back to summer school a bunch of times. And finally, I transferred to a school that offered music classes. And I wanted to be a musician when I was growing up. So that everything all of a sudden aligned. And I got straight A's. And I was just like, aha, now I get it. Now I actually see why people care about education. from there, I was accepted into a school. I got my graphic design degree and my marketing degree, and I worked very closely with an online academic advisor. And I thought that was so interesting to actually have somebody who is your coach, your guide, your mentor to help you through college and then life afterwards. I had the opportunity years later to then work as that same exact position, being able to coach thousands of online students to help them through their courses and their programs. And then from there, I was networking up a storm. And one of my friends one day said that he was an instructional designer. And I was like, well, what the heck is that? And he's like, well, you know how you're coaching your students through those online courses? I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, someone has to make those. That's me. It's like, I thought it was just the professors. He's like, no, I work with them, but no, someone's making the content, the activities, the assessments, the entire experience. Someone has to design that. That's instructional design. I was like, oh my gosh, I want to be an instructional designer. Like, how do I become an instructional designer? Right. And then from there, I started this journey trying to go through things about trying to figure out how people learn, what can I do to make something engaging, and just a lot of self-taught and going through the motions. And then finally one day, I was able to really impress folks over at Northeastern University by throwing at them everything I know about instructional design and learning and developing online communities and whatnot. I was just trying to go for it as much as I could. They allowed me to have that opportunity, and they saw some small talent in me to be able to train me to become an instructional designer. And I took that knowledge and took that with me to MIT, and I have been there ever since.
That is so awesome. And I love hearing that journey because so many of us are coming into education from having loved school and knowing since we were third graders ourselves that like, yes, I am lining my stuffed animals up and I'm teaching and this is awesome.
And I was the exact opposite where right? I was just like, no, I just want to play concerts. I want to play guitar. I'm like, I don't care. Like, why am I doing this? And finally, everything aligned. And I had a guitar teacher at the time, and I thought he had like the world's greatest job because he was just touring and playing guitar over the world. I was just like, I want to do that. And then years later, as I was an adult, while he still loves what he does, he was just like, do you know how taxing that was to travel to different places, to not really know when your next paycheck was coming from? And I was like, oh, maybe that was really a lot harder than I thought. I'm like, right. I might have found my calling later on, which is kind of fun.
That's awesome. The grass is always greener, right?
Right, right.
I think your experience, though, is so valuable because there are so many of our students and some even teachers going through the motions of what we're doing and not totally hearing or knowing why and understanding the purpose behind it. And so for someone like you to be able to coach folks through, especially college, is such a jump from high school world into greater independence and greater need for organization and motivation, you know, and to have someone who genuinely gets them and gets where they're coming from and where they're at. And then to, again, translate that work as an instructional designer, always having, like you said, I loved how you highlighted clarity and transparency to whatever the learning goal is or whatever the skill that you're targeting. So that desire to really always want to explain to folks, well, this is why we're doing it. And there is a purpose to this. And like, all right, are you into that purpose? If so, let's go do this, you know, or if not, all right, different path. Let's figure that out too. You know, that's just so valuable. And I think kids and I think teachers pick up on that. They know if you for real have that empathy and get it, or if you're just selling them something. So.
Oh, yeah, of course. And like how I was coaching those online students too, the very first conversation was always about getting to know them as a person. Where I was always like, why are you coming back to school? What is your goal? What do you want to do here? How can I help you? And if you didn't start with that, and some people right away were like, what's my first course? And I was like, no, let's talk. I need to know more about you, because if I can't guide you correctly, and for some people, unfortunately, we had to have like a real heart-to-heart really quickly, where they're like, I thought this degree could take me to this place. And I was like, well, it's like a start, but what you want to do is like, you need to go on for like your PhD. Like if you're coming in here and you're saying like, oh, this 4-year psychology degree is going to give me my own practice and I'm going to do X, Y, Z. And I'm like, no, you're not. And I am so sorry it's coming from me. But like, we need to map out for you a 12-year plan if this is what you really want to do. You know, it's not that type of thing. So it's really making sure that people understand and know, and how every single step of the way is going to build that skill set and that mindset to get them there. Because as I experienced that as a younger lad, where I was just like, I don't get it. No one's helping me. I'm like, oh, I'm done. I quit. And then, that's it. And I was like, no, I don't want people to go through that again. So I'm going to design something that's going to actually help you and solve your problem and give you the school, the everything you need for the tools and the skills and things of that nature. So
absolutely.
Makes sense.
And it just dawned on me when you said, talking to that undergrad student, like you need not a 4-year plan, a 12-year plan. And that seems super daunting. And I'm sure it did to that undergrad student too, right? You've got in your head, all right, 4 years from now, this is what'll happen. But that's how our elementary students or our middle school students probably feel, right? Like in their brains, they are not thinking, I'm going to be doing this for the next 12 years or 13 years, kindergartners.
Oh, no way.
Like they're thinking end of this year. Maybe they're thinking winter break, like they're not thinking in those long-term ways. And I wonder how many teachers are as well. Because if you're a 2nd grade teacher or you're a 5th grade teacher, are you thinking conceptually about, the really long-term trajectory and what we're doing? And I know we talk a lot about vertical design and that kind of thing and planning so that, what we learned last year is built upon this year and preps for next year, that kind of thing. But it would be interesting to find out more about teachers and kids' views on that. I think that could be, if someone's looking for a research study, maybe that would be something to look into.
And I will say that one thing that I have been doing since the pandemic, which has just been an absolute thrill to be able to do, is that I have been speaking with more students in the Boston area who are part of after-school programs. And they're 7th grade, 8th grade, high school. And I'm telling them about instructional design now. And I think that is fascinating because I wish someone had told me about an emerging field back then. And some of them have been asking about like, can I get an internship already? Like, how do I start to do this? And I was just like, oh my gosh, like you're 16 and you're trying to become an instructional designer at 16. I was like, you are going to be a rock star by the time you actually go out into the field. Like if I had known that this is an area that I was passionate about, I would have prepared. I would have been able to shadow people. I could have talked to people online and do virtual calls. That now is a thing. Back then it wasn't a thing.
So easy.
It's going to be so cool to see where that future generation goes because now they're being exposed to that and given kind of a heads up about this is the way the world's going. The instructional design has been around since World War II. This is nothing new here, but the way it's completely just changed and the trajectory has just exploded over the years. We're going to have this for years to come. Every company is hiring for instructional designer, like everybody. So doesn't matter what sector or what you're doing. This is the field to be in, like right now and in the future.
Yeah. And there's so many folks on the podcast we've talked to who are in, I call ed adjacent fields now or positions. They started out as teachers and now they're doing this other thing that is related to education, but in a different way. And I'm really appreciative of the fact that you highlighted that it's not just in the field of education. Like this is private sector work as well that folks are looking for instructional designers for their company's professional development opportunities or whatever else it might be. There's just the world is your oyster, I'd imagine. So
everyone, I posted a status yesterday on LinkedIn and I found positions for Apple, TikTok, JetBlue, and Kentucky Fried Chicken. And I shared that on LinkedIn. I was like,
right?
Fast food is hiring instructional designers, people. Like, it's not just the Apple, Google, Tesla world. Yes, they all are. Don't get me wrong. But like anyone, it's so cool to see.
And you landed at Northeastern and MIT, which is very impressive and pretty cool too. So like that's, the options.
Fake it till you make it. That's all I've learned.
Right? That is awesome. Oh man, this is fun. I feel like we could talk a lot about this topic. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back from our break, I want to dive more into kind of the nitty-gritty of instructional design and see if we can give teachers some really actionable advice or pointers to get them going this week in their classrooms. So stick with us, friends. What's the one thing all online schools and programs struggle with? Student engagement and the ability to truly personalize interventions. How do we solve those problems? With the use of Admin Dash, a brand new Canvas LTI tool from SYS Education. Admin Dash allows online teachers to see a risk assessment score that proactively identifies students who may need more specialized attention or intervention, and offers a communication log that provides an outlet for complete transparency among teachers, admin, students, and families. At just 99 cents per student per year, and with no minimum price and no fees, you can't afford to not use Admin Dash. For more information about Admin Dash, contact sales@syseducation.org and start connecting proactively with your online learners. Welcome back, online educators. Now that you've had some time to ponder your career decisions and make your next career plans after hearing Luke speak about all the cool opportunities with instructional design, I want to get more into the details a little bit about doing it day to day and maybe what our folks listening can start doing as they think about this now. So this season, we're talking a bit more about things like backward design, starting with the end in mind, especially when you're revising or building a curriculum. I've spoken with Jay McTighe this season, which was really exciting, about understanding by design and the whole UBD framework. SYS tries to use that in our instructional coaching as well. I've seen your, Luke, YouTube channel that you also follow the work of Dr. Katie Novak, who I am a big fan of, and Tom Thibodeau around universal design for learning. I think UDL is really powerful. It's a great framework for supporting instructional design. We have talked about UDL, we've talked about UBD, but it would be really cool to hear your take on these ideas since you're the expert. You actually have it in your title for online learning. So if a teacher's looking, say they're revising their current online curriculum, or maybe they're building it from scratch and they have the privilege of doing that, and it's really exciting, how can that teacher, whoever's listening today, become a better instructional designer for their students? How does UBD or UDL play into that? Or is that maybe for another day? Like, where do we begin?
Oh, no. It's definitely for today, for sure. And I have to say how awesome that is, because I absolutely love backward design, understanding by design, and also UDL. Like, the very first book I ever read to help me get into this field was actually UDL in the Cloud by Dr. Novak and Tom Thibodeau. And since then, they've become great friends of mine. I've asked them for their thoughts and advice on many, many, many things. So it's been awesome to work with them. And like I said, I was trained on backward design. That was the very first thing I thought of. And I am so glad that that was the model that I was trained on, because to me, it just makes the most amount of sense. Like, shouldn't we be starting first by identifying the problem and then figuring out what the goal and the outcome should be? And then let's work our way backwards. I don't know. It's not
how we do it everywhere else in life, so why not?
Right? For every other thing, it just kind of makes a lot of sense, right? So, of course, why don't we combine our two efforts? And then the whole beauty of universal design for learning also is something, too, that we should, once again, it should always be top of mind, that we should be thinking about designing learning experiences for everybody. That just kind of also makes sense. It's really weird to imagine if I was doing a presentation in the room, and let's say that there's 10 people, but I'm only going to serve 9 people, and the one person who I'm just like, you'll figure it out, put him in the corner. You wouldn't do that.
Right.
So obviously, let's think about doing everything for everybody. So I love to be able to do, from taking both of those two different types of ideas, is that you need to be able to incorporate student voice. The first thing that I acknowledge as an instructional designer was that I realized that even though I am the one who is designing the learning experience, I am not the intended target audience. And I may have a different perception about what someone is going through compared to how I designed it. I may have an entirely different idea. I was like, they're going to go through this. It's going to look like this. And then I'm reading their comments and I'm being able to talk with them. And I was like, you didn't get that thing out of there, did you? No, you had a very, very different type of idea. Okay, I screwed up that one. And for some of those things, sometimes it's not crystal clear until you are able to gain this feedback. So what I like to be able to do, because you mentioned about revising courses, is that my initial strategy, if at all possible, is that I do beta testing. I actually do pilot programs of every single course before it launches live, because I want to be able to get both quantitative and qualitative data to help guide me so that way I know. Because if you are doing the traditional thing of putting in surveys, let's say at the end of the course, maybe it's an 8-week course, 16-week, whatever it is, sometimes you look at that data and you're like, I still don't know. Am I on track? It's kind of vague. Or maybe they say something and you're like, I thought they were going to go one way and instead they went the other way. So to give you an example, when I'm designing surveys for courses, I'm asking about timeliness. How long did it take you? The relevancy, is what I am designing actually helpful for you and for your world and your studies and your journey? And talking to about engagement. Is what I designed actually something that was interesting to you? And maybe it's using scenario-based learning or project-based learning or for simulations or like whatever it is. Did it speak to you enough that you wanted to do it? And primarily my audience is adults. And for adults, they have time commitment problems. They have a billion things going on. So if I'm designing something and if I'm saying it's only going to take 5 hours, it better take 5 hours. And if I'm lucky, it takes less and they still get the same learning experience.
Right.
So from there, I've done things with those surveys. And then I ask, how long did this section take you? And I would see that someone's just like, oh, it took me 12 hours, 15 hours. And I'm like, what are you doing? It's supposed to take 5 hours. Like, where did I go wrong?
Right.
And because, of course, I'm assuming it's me. It must be me. I must have designed something. And then from there, I will do focus groups and interviews, and I will talk with these people. And then that's when I can actually say with data that like 75% of you said that this took longer than 5 hours. Why? What did you do? What was actually going on? And then I would hear from one example, which like blew my mind that I never expected, is that I design with reflection questions at the end of every single week. So what I ask you to do, instead of just like progressively moving on to the very next topic, I want you to actually sit there, pause, and think about what you just experienced and how could you take this newly learned information and apply it into a past experience. What would you do differently? What would you change? If you could think about in the future, how are you going to be using these skills to be able to help serve you in the future? Things like that. And I don't grade those. That is a you to you thing. It is just you just kind of journaling, writing it down. And for that section, I did not give a prompt or a guideline of how long should this be. And I was like, just write. Just
right?
do your
It's
thing.
For you.
And then some people are like, oh yeah, Luke, I wrote 12 pages. I was like, why are you writing 12 pages? Like, oh, you just told me to write as much as I want. I was like, okay. It was like, I meant like a paragraph or two, not 12, but sure enough, some people are like, no, I did like 10 to 12 pages, APA style citations. Like, oh, okay, great.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Right? But once again, it wasn't graded. So I was not looking at it. Ungraded activity, you do you. And instead, I quickly learned, oh my gosh, I need to fix this. So what I do from there, taking all of the student voice, learner voice now into consideration from all of this wonderful data that I do have, or perhaps you already have them because your school does it a certain way and gives you the data or whatever it is. Then I do this activity that's called course mapping. And I'm not sure, you talked about course mapping on the podcast before?
Do tell.
So for course mapping, think of it like if you took every single part of your course, what would the student journey look like? And imagine it as almost if you wanted to be able to, let's say, put it onto either an Excel spreadsheet, a Google sheet, or even a sticky notes, whatever, be able to write down exactly what they experience entire journey for this one. So for one of my courses, let's say that they first start with a reading, a video, a poll question, another video, a practice question, and then a reflection. And that is one section of the online course. I will literally write down what they are doing every step of the way, every section, every page. And then from all of this data, I can then go back and use the feedback and pinpoint precisely where I could change something. So if people are saying that, hey, I really enjoyed this type of topic that was talking about, let's say, scenario, you wrote to me a really great and fantastic hypothetical scenario. I really enjoyed these. Can you do them more? This is the feedback, let's say. And I'm like, okay, great. So I go into the course map and I was like, where did I incorporate this scenario? And I find one section and I'm like, aha. Now can I add those more into different places of the course itself? And I find every single little place and try to make it more and more engaging, because the more we can do that, the more we can design for other people to make it more of a realistic type of point of view. And then eventually you can expand to make multiple scenarios. You can provide that flexibility for students to be able to pick and choose what scenario do they want to answer, because that is more relevant for them and wherever they're at currently inside of their journey. So that's just one very long example of combining UDL and backward design and how I try to do that.
When you were talking about the feedback you ask for, it reminded me of SMART goals. Like you want to know if this was timely, was this relevant, was it applicable to you? You know, all of those things that I specifically hit on, the things that you're trying to learn. And so if we're writing maybe our end goal as a SMART goal, you know, by June, students will, blah, that sort of thing. then we can ask for specific feedback that speaks to all of those aspects of our goals. So that was just an aha I had. I love your idea
Totally.
about course mapping. So I'm really eager to learn more about this. If I'm a K through 12 teacher, I can see using course mapping weekly, maybe not necessarily to get feedback every week, because that would probably be a little overwhelming to students, but you could actually ask for feedback from just a handful of students every week. There's a lot of ways you could probably do it.
And that's also for you as the instructional designer. Because you're asking, like, how do I become like a better instructional designer? Every instructional designer does this course mapping process of not just collecting feedback, but more about like when I'm making a blueprint where I'm finally saying like, okay, I have everything, right? Yes. And now what does it actually look like before I go and I build it inside of a learning management system, or before I go and actually deliver this lecture in person or this workshop, the training, whatever it is? You need to be able to clearly see that so that way you know what people are experiencing every step of the way, and that way you don't forget about something. Or if you realize that perhaps this is taking way too long, I need to be able to shrink this down. Maybe it needs, like I was saying, for mine, I needed more directions to go back into that prompt and specify 250 words or less, kind of thing. Right. They're like, oh, okay. And I was like, yay, great. So you can do anything when it comes to course mapping, but just giving some form of a visual type of, it's like making a physical manifestation of a visual, because if not, you're like, oh yeah, they're doing a reading at this point in time. Well, how long is the reading going to take them? And then, oh, they're watching a video. Well, are they actually watching it from start to finish? If you're saying that they're going to be doing some form of, let's say, a discussion, how long does the discussion take? Where do you want that discussion to go? Is it going to be leading into more things for the in-person training afterwards? Or do you want them to keep on carrying this on? Like that's the entire course is the discussion. Like what is it? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that just helps out mapping and planning out curriculum for sure.
I think it makes us more intentional as well, because I think in my practice, and I think a lot of us maybe have done mapping to some degree without knowing that we were necessarily doing it. But to add the time onto there is really helpful. And then there's that thing where sometimes we're doing things and we're not conscious of them. And so to make that conscious is really empowering and really important, because it keeps us goal-oriented. I think it keeps us focused on what it is that we are trying to accomplish at the end of the module, at the end of the week, at the end of the year, whatever it might be. So if the more we can make, like you said, a visual manifestation of what we're doing, what we want kids to be doing, and then we'll see maybe some trends. Oh, it takes kids way longer to do a reading on Friday than it does on Tuesday. I'm going to put those at the beginning. Oh, what's happening in their other courses? That's, all of those, you start to wonder and inquire about things. And I appreciate that you brought up qualitative and quantitative feedbacks. I think those two are really important. The numbers tell us so much, but the person who gave us the number can tell us a whole lot more with their own words or expression.
So much more. And another example, literally just based off of that one too. And sometimes it's about uncovering a problem and a solution that maybe wasn't apparent to you, and you didn't know that existed. But for one of the things that I found when I was hosting these different focus groups and asking people things, one of the comments, because I leave them a section, which is usually like a big no-no in quantitative surveys, is that you don't put like an open-ended comment box. Everyone says like, don't do that. And I was like, well, they're my learners, they're my students. I want to know, just write to me your thoughts. And one of the things I kept on hearing is that they want to be more involved in the course. And I was like, that's interesting. I was like, well, what does more involved mean? I was like, do you want more readings? Like, nope. You want more exercises? No. I'm like, okay, what's more involved? And then when we actually had our conversations and I was asking them about things, the main issue that came about from like trying to think about all of these things, the reason why they were saying no to readings and exercises, more videos and whatnot and so forth, is that they didn't have time to do them, but they wanted to be involved with them. Which I would have never learned about that from a survey, where I was like,
interesting.
Right? I was like, so that's tricky. I'm like, so let's do an exercise. Where do you have time if time is the issue? And then what I heard from a majority of those learners was that they have time in their commute. I was like, oh, so if I make a podcast, would you listen? Or is that just going to go nowhere? And to my surprise, they said yes. And I'm like, okay, let's figure this out. So I started incorporating podcasts into my courses. And some of them, I just find ones literally online that align to the topic of the week. And I share announcements. Others, I literally make from scratch. And it's me literally being the narrator for the things. And I was shocked after seeing not just the number of downloads of how many people actually listened, but they would go into the discussion boards afterwards and say like, so when's the next episode coming out? It's like,
Oh,
there is no
funny.
next episode. It's like, this isn't a series. This is me trying to help you. Like, it was trying to
Right.
solve your problem. But I had no idea about that. But from doing that, going back to Universal Design for Learning, I hit an entirely different target audience that people are like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I've never used podcasting courses before. I was like, yeah, me either. To tell you the truth, this was a first for me. And it really was a win. And then I could take everything from the podcast. And if you're not a podcast person, I could take that and I could take the transcript from that one and turn that more into a newsletter or a blog to serve the other people who don't like
Yeah.
podcasts.
Yep, absolutely.
It's all connected at the end of the day. You just don't really realize it until you're trying to formulate stuff and you're like, oh, yeah, this can actually become a real product, a real solution.
That's so cool. And then you're giving more options, you're giving that buffet of choices to folks. And that helps them, I'm sure, to feel more connected within the course as well. And, you said it, so many guests, maybe every guest says it, you have to know your students. You have to know your audience. You have to give them voice. You have to give them choice. Like, it is just at the heart of what we do when we're trying to educate or share information with someone else. So I am really thankful that you brought that up as well. I feel like the whole audience now is just going to start going on Google or LinkedIn and looking for instructional design training and jobs after this. 'Cause
Then
it's
my
so
job
exciting.
is done. That's why I'm here, to make everyone become instructional designers.
It's so fun. I mean, I know just from a hands-on experiential my life experience and education, it is such rewarding work, both working directly with students and then also helping teachers do this as well. And so I can't imagine being able to do it in a variety of settings and all of that. It's just the world's your oyster, instructional designers. So go crack it.
We got this. We're
Right.
definitely off and running. The amount of things that I keep on seeing and hearing and reading about instructional design is just, I've been thinking about, like, when I first became a designer back in 2016. I first heard about instructional design back in 2014. It took me 2 years to become an instructional designer because, once again, I'm a special person. But I finally became one. But now seeing that, like, everyone knows about instructional design is mind-boggling, because when I first became a designer and I would introduce myself on projects and I'd say I'm an instructional designer, everyone looked at me like I had 3 heads. And they're like, what do you do? Like, why are you here? And I was like, yeah, about that. I was like, so you folks don't know what instructional design is. And I was in higher ed. So I was like, I assumed of all places, higher ed people would know about instructional design.
Right.
And nope, it slowly kept on making its way. Even now, when we have talks with professors and instructors and lecturers and so on and so forth, we say instructional design. Most of them know what we do, which is still mind-boggling to me. And I'm like,
Absolutely.
wow, we're really here. Yeah, it's interesting.
It's awesome. And I've got to say, all the folks I've had the pleasure of speaking with who are in that field of instructional design, from you to Dr. Katie Novak, Tom Schimmer, designing assessments, like, all of these folks are very approachable, normal, kind, down-to-earth people. And it's really cool. So I really encourage anyone in the audience who wants to listen to another podcast, maybe by any of these folks, or purchase a book or whatever it might be, like, you're going to get really down to earth, just like we've heard from Luke today, like very practical ideas and advice and information. And I think that's just super refreshing. This isn't like ed jargon of the moment fad thing. This is, research-based and human-based data and information and experience, and say, okay, and this is what we know now, and this is how we do best now, and always being open to the next idea or learning more about how humans operate and how we learn, how adults learn, how kids learn, all of that. I don't know. It's just super cool speaking with folks like you about all these topics. And so I really want to encourage any educator out there or administrator who's like, yeah, this does sound kind of cool. Like, listen to Luke's podcast, go grab a book. Like, you're going to get very down to earth, practical, and good information. So Dive on in.
I try to avoid any and all jargon if possible. That drives me
Yeah.
nuts. People just keep throwing out 3-letter words at me, and I was like, what are we talking about? I don't know, I don't know what's happening. And then when I say it, I'm like, I have to stop and correct myself because I mentioned subject matter expert before. SME is something I've been saying. The very first thing I learned was how to say SME. And I was like, SME. And I'm like, wait, no, stop. Let me make sure you explain what we're talking about here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah, it drives me nuts.
I'm from special education world, so I
Right.
know all about.
Right.
Yep,
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of us do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think that's actually
absolutely.
a really good side point too, though, because when you're speaking with someone who maybe has a different educational background than you, or just experience, they worked in the next town over from you, or they've got trained at a different college, the jargon that we think is universal, or like, oh yeah, absolutely, you know what that means, right? Not the case.
No.
The less ed jargon we can use with one another, the better, always.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And it's also to that side point too, which is also kind of interesting about things, is that there's a time and a place to use jargon, which is usually we try not to do that. But at the same time, if I know that you've been an instructional designer for, however period of time, and if you kept on saying subject matter expert every single time, I would look at you kind of funny being like, why do you keep saying the full thing? Like, I know that we're on the same page. It's like, so what are you kind of doing? Which, when I think about for a lot of, and I'm sure for your target audience too, for your listeners at home who are teachers, and some of them I'm sure are thinking about instructional design, kind of for the future about where is this going to be going.
Yes.
One of the things that I often talk about is that, like, yes, you need to get experience and everything, but also like you need to get exposure into how we talk, because when you go into your interview, you want to be able to say, like, I'm one of you. I know what you're saying. Like, you don't need to
Yes.
break it down for me. Like, I got it. Because when we start talking about things and throwing out, UDL and UBD and SBL and PBL and SME and all that stuff, and it's like, I hope you know what I'm saying. And I can tell if you do or if you don't. It's very clear.
Yes.
Where, that's kind of a thing like that, where it's just like, so yes, jargon is super annoying. I never use it. However, if we're going to be talking about being in a type of a project together or something like that, and it's like, oh, it's kind of expected. I want you to, to kind of shoot the breeze with me. I
Talk
would
and
feel
chop.
like we're comrades here. Like, I want you to be able to kind of be able to say that with me. And so, yeah, that's a whole different podcast topic to be like, is jargon good or bad? It really is.
I'll add it to season 4.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah,
Oh, I love it. All right, I have one last question for you, Luke, if you're
Sure.
game.
of course.
I'm asking everyone this season, if there was one thing, material or otherwise, that you could give to every teacher in the U.S., what would it be and why?
It'd be a high five because you're doing great.
Awesome.
And keep on going. That'd be that's my simple answer. I was
I
just like,
love
yeah,
it.
I want to tell you kudos and good job, because my gosh, the amount of things that teachers have gone through recently is just out of this world crazy. So a massive congrats to everybody for doing your thing and to keep on going, because it's been just so insane. If I put myself joking aside to say like an actual helpful piece of advice, instead of just giving you high
That's
fives, which
awesome. High fives
I
are
will
awesome.
do. I would say I will give high fives if I see you in person whenever I actually go out into the world again and see people, which I still haven't done yet, which is kind of funny. But that's a side story. But for real helpful advice, though, one of the things that I would say is that for a lot of teachers, I know that obviously the burnout is real across the board. Maybe it's burnout from classroom or burnout from applying to jobs and getting nowhere because you kind of feel stuck.
Yeah.
The thing that I could highly advise you to be able to do is to form a mastermind, which is interesting because I hate that word because masterminds to me kind of feel like that weird salesy kind of thing. But really what I mean by this is that I want you to be able to thrive in a community with like-minded individuals. And how I personally do that is that I have masterminds and I have them for everything. So when it came to me trying to be able to write my book, I met with other people who encouraged me every single week where we would talk about wins and losses and support, and it would hold me accountable. And that's how I wrote my book in 6 months, because I had people who I constantly met with every Tuesday at 6:30
Amazing.
and basically saying, here's my update, here's my chapter, here's what I'm currently doing. And they would always be there to guide me, to give me that support, especially if I was feeling down. And it's the exact same way when it comes to anything in life. People have them when it comes to fitness or businesses or whatever it is. We always have groups of people that we rely on. And I have seen people do that from like a teacher to teacher connection where 3 or 4 people get together every, whatever night on Zoom or after class or whatever it is, and just talking about the same thing. And for some of them, it's talking about applying to jobs and being able to say like, oh, I heard of this new resource. I was able to make it into the second round of this type of interview. I was able to do X, Y, and Z. And that's going to encourage you and motivate you and to help you to keep on going until literally all of you have crossed the finish line and now you're off and doing the next thing. So whether it's for a project or for whatever it is, just be able to rely on other like-minded people who you can find. That is by far the best piece of advice I can give you right now.
I love it. Find your group, right? Find your folks who are going to help you do what it is you want to do. I think that's awesome advice and a great gift to give to our teachers. Find your mastermind and give yourselves a high five once you do. How's that?
Yes. Self-high five. Yes. Always encouraged.
A my five. Give yourself a my five.
Yes, there you go. There you go.
Oh, man. Luke Hobson, this has been so fun. If listeners want to keep listening to you or they want to get in touch with you, we will have links in the show notes to your book, to your YouTube, all that. So, folks, you'll be able to find Luke. But how could people get in touch with you if they want to go find you right now?
Sure. I mean, the easiest way is honestly is to Google Dr. Luke Hobson. I will pop right up everywhere on the internet. So the blog, the podcast, the YouTube channel, of course, is the book. Everything will just literally appear. The website's drlukehobson.com. If you want to be able to find me there, you can do that too. Also, I am super active on LinkedIn. If you just want to add me on LinkedIn and shoot me over a message and say hi, this is literally how I talk. There's no magic or hidden. Like, I am just a kind of down-to-earth, normal person who likes to nerd out. So please feel free. Shoot me over a message or a connection, and always happy to help out where I can.
Awesome. Thanks so much again for your time today. This has been really fun and really great learning experience. So keep doing the awesome work you're doing. We need it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of SYS Presents Adventures in Online Education. Special thanks to my guest today, Dr. Luke Hobson. Luke taught us that we can design awesome online courses for our students if we think intentionally about a few things, like backwards planning, removing barriers, and listening to feedback. If you liked what you heard today, please hit subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. Want to connect? On Twitter, you can follow the show at SYS Presents. We love hearing from you. If you're interested in finding out more about SYS Education and our products and services, head to syseducation.org. Lastly, this podcast wouldn't be possible without our exceptional team at SYS Education, including my dream team consisting of sound engineer Natalie Farrell, graphic designer and social media and website manager Lexi Warren, and our producer, Bo Neal. Thanks for listening today, and remember, we can learn new things.
Thanks for listening.